Imagine the moment that makes you gasp out loud. A woman in a glittering gown rips another woman's dress because she thinks she's just the help. Now, imagine the room falls silent because the supposed waitress is the silent co-host of the gala and the attacker's millionaire husband is watching. If you love true, cinematic, heart-in-your-throat stories that call out injustice and end with redemption, hit subscribe right now, because tonight's story will have you talking. The orchestra at the Alderidge Foundation Gala played a lilting jazz standard as servers curved through the room like fish in a gold river of light. Crystal winked. Laughter climbed the chandelier. Old money smiled at new money and pretended not to measure it. On the balcony level, a woman in a backless emerald dress leaned over the rail like a queen surveying subjects. Her name was Sienna Vale. People knew the dress cost more than most cars. People knew her husband, Magnus Vale, logistics magnate, chin like a granite ledge, eyes that often looked tired. People knew the way Sienna drifted, expecting traffic to part. The room obliged. Down on the floor, Anika Johnson moved with a tray and the kind of balance ballerinas dream of. She smiled with her whole face, tucked natural coils behind her ear with a quick knuckle, and murmured, "Sparkling, sir," to a row of tuxedos. The men grinned back, the kind that never realized their grins were practiced. Anika wore a simple black dress, cinched at the waist. If you glanced once, you saw a server. If you looked twice, you felt something else, poise that didn't come from carrying plates. "You really love this, don't you?" said Marina, a pastry chef passing with a small white tower that looked like a miracle. Anika's smile turned private. "I love what it stands for," she said. "Scholarships, sea grants, first-generation founders who just need air." Marina winked and steered away. Anika pivoted to the corner table, table 14, where Sienna parked like a yacht. Heads tilted toward her, sails catching gossip. The emerald sequins drank the light, refusing to give it back. "Would you like?" Anika began. "Finally," Sienna said without looking. "Your service has been leisurely. I'm sorry for the wait. Would you prefer sparkling or—" Sienna's gaze rose to meet hers, bored, the way you look at a painting you've decided to dislike. Her eyes walked Anika's face, then the curl that had escaped, then the dress. A pause, a calculation. The music swelled. "Sparkling," Sienna said. "And keep your eyes on the tray, darling. This isn't a meet and greet." A few lips at the table tightened. A senator's wife glanced at the floor. Anika placed the flute with the exactness of a surgeon. "Enjoy," she said, and turned, shoulders level, spine straight. An hour later, the silent auction was a constellation of pens and promises. Anika crossed the foyer toward the terrace to collect an empty tray when the collision happened. 3 women in glaciers of perfume brushed past. One heel slid. A glass kissed the marble and exploded into rain. Ofer, Sienna, appearing out of perfume and impatience, stepped directly into the fan of champagne. Her emerald hem sparkled for the wrong reason. She stared at Anika as if the physics of spilled liquid could be bullied into reversal. "I'm so sorry," Anika said. You'll get nothing but a lesson," Sienna said, voice dipped in honey and broken glass. She leaned in, breath wine sweet. "You girls always want to be seen, don't you? Well, look now." She hooked a polished nail's edge into the seam at Anika's shoulder and pulled. The fabric gave with a small, helpless sound. A black tear opened. Gasps flocked. A violinist hit a wrong note upstairs and tried to pretend it didn't happen. Magnus Vale was 20 feet away, mid-handshake with a mayor who explained budgets as if they were origami. He turned at the sound of fabric tearing, a sound he knew too well, the sound of ropes parting under weight. His face changed. People who watched fortunes rise and crash learned to recognize expressionlessness as a kind of storm. Anika stood very still. For 3 seconds, she did nothing at all. The hall breathed with her in and out. Sienna smiled, a small victorious thing. "Now you'll remember why you're here," Sienna murmured. Anika raised her chin. "To serve," she said. "To serve," Sienna repeated, satisfied. "No," Anika said, voice quiet, steady. "To stand." The room flickered. Then the PA system chimed like a polite bell. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice said, cheerful. Please take your seats for remarks by our co-founder. Heads turned toward the stage at the far end of the hall, where the Aldridge Foundation crest glowed against velvet. Anika's eyes slid there and back to Sienna, apology and fire braided in them. She lifted the torn strap, crossed the marble, and vanished behind the heavy curtain. Magnus reached his wife. "What did you do?" he asked softly. "She was sloppy," Sienna said. "These people are so." "People," Magnus said, and the word landed with a weight Sienna did not like. Behind the curtain, a stylist gasped as Anika appeared. "Ms. Johnson, your dress. It'll hold," Anika said, shrugging into a white shawl someone thrust at her. She stood before the wings, breathing in the dark, hearing the rustle of an audience that didn't know it was about to learn something. She touched the mic pack at her waist and thought of her mother, Florence Johnson, who used to iron other people's tablecloths at 2 in the morning so that Anika's science fair board would look crisp. In the hall, a hush watered the room. "Please welcome," the announcer said, smiling big enough to be heard, "our co-founder and tonight's host, Anika Johnson." There's a silence that slices like paper. You don't see it coming, and then, sting. The room's head turned like a school of fish. Sienna's smile fell like a chandelier from a frayed rope. Magnus didn't move. Marina pooped in the kitchen. Anika stepped into the light in a torn black dress and a white wrap that looked, suddenly, like armor. She took the podium and met the gaze of 200 people who had ordered, measured, and appraised. Her voice filled the hall like warm tea poured into cold porcelain. "Good evening," she said. "When my mother cleaned houses, she taught me 2 things: to see what others overlook and to treat every room like it belongs to someone you love." A tremor moved through the crowd. Recognition, embarrassment, the prickle of being seen by someone you failed to see. "When we founded Aldridge," she continued, "we promised to serve people who are overlooked. Not because they need charity, but because the world has been stingy with invitations." She glanced down at her shoulder, smiled without smiling. Sometimes, a tear in the fabric reveals what it's made of. Somewhere in the back, someone clapped, a single brave bird. Others joined. The sound gathered its feathers and flew. Magnus' hands moved once, twice, then again, slow, deliberate. Sienna stood frozen, eyes glossy. The senator's wife looked at her champagne. The violinist upstairs found the note he'd lost and held it until the room remembered to breathe. Anika spoke about scholarships that had sent 26 students through degrees nobody in their families had dared to pronounce. She told the story of Jaleel, who turned a barber chair into a safe place for boys to talk about grief. She said the names of grant winners like blessings. Each name rose and hung in the chandeliers like a new kind of light. When she finished, the room stood. Not everyone. There are always a few who sit with their arms folded like locked doors, but enough to make the floor tremble lightly. Backstage, she exhaled like someone stepping out of cold water. Marina burst through the curtain, nearly spearing her with a chocolate tort. "You were," she made a fireworks noise. "But your dress. It'll sew," Anika said, "like everything else." She turned and found Magnus Vale there in the shadow, his tuxedo a square of night, his expression stripped down to truth. "I saw," he said. "I'm sorry." Anika looked at him for a long second. The kind of look that makes a man decide who he will be in the morning. "What you do next will say it," she replied. He nodded. Then he looked past her, toward the hall, toward the woman in emerald who had forgotten how to be small. "May I help fix what I can?" he asked. "Start with your table," Anika said gently. "And then we'll see." He extended a business card and drew it back. "No, that would be the old way. If you'll allow it, tonight I'll make a statement. In the room, not in a memo." Anika watched him walk toward the light. The torn seam tickled her shoulder. She wanted to cry, not because of the dress, but because of her mother's face she saw in the stage reflection. Proud, tired, fierce. She blinked the tears back into salt and steel. From a balcony above, the emerald dress burned like a traffic light stuck on go. Sienna's fingers found her clutch, found the phone inside, found a world of friends waiting to agree with her. She typed. She erased. Below, Magnus approached, jaw set. Did you enjoy your lesson? He asked quietly. Sienna opened her mouth. The orchestra slid into a waltz. The night pivoted on a pin. For a second, Sienna saw herself reflected in Magnus' eyes, not as a social star, but as a stranger who had wandered into her own life. She stilled. Then she said the only thing that kept her standing. You're overreacting. Magnus' mouth tightened. No, he said. For 10 years I've been underreacting. What does that mean? The words came out like ice cubes. It means, he said, I've watched you confuse status with safety, wit with cruelty, our money with permission. And I watched you tear a woman's dress because you thought her dignity was costume jewelry. Sienna's skin prickled. A camera phone hovered somewhere behind a potted palm. She lowered her voice. You will not embarrass me. You embarrassed yourself, he replied. And you hurt someone I respect. He paused. You didn't even ask who she was. She's a waitress, Sienna said automatically. Look at the dress. Magnus looked past her at the stage where Anika had stood, voice like a bell tower at dawn. He turned back. She is the co-founder of this foundation. She grew what we only watered, and she is not a label for your convenience. Sienna laughed, a brittle spill. Well, how convenient for her, she said. Look at how quickly everyone forgives her fashion choices. Magnus' eyes cooled. Sienna, he said, listen. The MC returned to the mic. We have a special announcement, he said, chipper and thin. Mr. Magnus Vale would like to address the room. Sienna's breath snagged. You wouldn't. I will, he said. Because if money can fix things, then the least it can do is prove we heard the lesson. He stepped away before her magic words could bind him again. He crossed the carpet with the walk of a man who has decided not to be ashamed of his own conscience. People parted, not because he demanded it, but because conviction radiates a strange gravity. Anika stood near the wing, shawl gathered, listening. When he took the stage, she folded her arms and planted herself in a quiet place inside, the place where you watch what people choose. Magnus faced the crowd and did not tap the microphone. He didn't need the small power. Good evening, he said. I came here tonight expecting to spend money and shake hands. That was my idea of service. He glanced toward the balcony. But I saw something I won't excuse. You could feel the room brace itself, the way ships brace for weather. He told the truth in one clean cut. No names, no myth, just a picture of what happened, described as if it had happened to anyone, as if it could happen to anyone, which was the point. Dignity, he said, is not a luxury item. Return to the shelf when it doesn't match the room. Then he did the thing Sienna feared and hoped he wouldn't. He moved from apology to action. On behalf of my family, Magnus said, I'm endowing the Aldridge Fellowship for Service Leadership with 10 scholarships per year, specifically for students from underrepresented communities who work while they study. And I'm doubling my company's supplier diversity targets starting tomorrow. We'll publish the list. The applause that rose wasn't polite. It sounded like something being unchained. Anika let the air go out of her lungs slowly. She didn't clap. Not yet. Words bloom or they wither. She wanted to see if these would be watered. In the balcony, Sienna felt the floor tilt. The world did not obey her. The realization made her feel suddenly small, like this had been a dream she was waking from. She wanted to flee. Pride is always fastest when it's running away. Instead, she descended the stairs. Halfway down, she met a girl in a black blazer holding a tablet. Kay, an Aldridge intern with a nose ring in the calm of the lighthouse. Kay recognized her and didn't flinch. Ma'am, she said, the powder room is to your left. Sienna paused. The girl's eyes held no fear, only a wider story. Do you think I'm a monster? Sienna asked unexpectedly. Kay's mouth quirked. I think moments make monsters, she said. And also people who don't choose different moments after. Sienna blinked. And if I choose a different one now? Kay gaze flicked to the stage where Magnus shook hands with the MC and to the wings where Anika stood like a question mark turned into a spine. Then you choose it for yourself, Kay said. Not for the cameras. There are times when the universe hands you a mirror so clean you can't pretend it's a window. Sienna breathed in and out and remembered a girl who had cleaned a hair salon after closing, who had been told her value was the tips she could coax. She remembered reinventing herself into someone who could never be told no again. Somewhere in that reinvention, she had begun saying no to other people's humanity. She turned toward the wings, not the exit. Backstage, the hum of a room made a kind of fog. Anika was finally sitting, one hand on her torn strap, when footsteps approached. She stood. Magnus moved aside without flourish. Sienna faced the woman she had called darling like a command. The words formed and dissolved because apologies are not fashion. If you accessorize them, they break. I was cruel, Sienna said softly, voice raw. I humiliated you. I am sorry. Anika studied her, and in that study lived 1,000 intersections. You can be right, and you can be kind, and you can also be exhausted. Tonight, she decided to be precise. You were, Anika said, and you did. And your apology is a beginning, not a payment. Sienna nodded too fast, like a student taking notes. I'd like to repair what I tore, she said, eyes flicking to the strap. But I know stitches aren't the same as the fabric before. Anika almost smiled. No, she said. They're stronger if you learned. What would learning look like? Sienna asked. Anika tilted her head. Come with me to the scholarship brunch tomorrow, she said. Sit with mothers and students. Listen, and there's a program we run, culture workshops for donors who want to be more than donors. Sienna colored. Is that a punishment? It's an invitation, Anika said. Punishments satisfy witnesses. Invitations change people. Magnus exhaled, some muscle unclenching around his ribs. We'll be there, he said. Sienna glanced at him. She had not expected the we. She felt something like gratitude and something like shame, braided in a new pattern. Also, Anika added, there's a seamstress on 3rd who does emergency work. Her name is Imani. Tell her I sent you. She won't take your money. The corners of Sienna's mouth lifted, then fell. Why not? Because you'll work folding at her shop for an hour instead, Anika said simply. Her rules. Sienna swallowed. I can do that. Magnus smiled with one side of his mouth. You can, he said quietly, not as command, but as faith. Word traveled. It always does. But here's the twist people didn't expect when they gossip under their breath. What people remembered most from a night wasn't the tear, or the endowment, or even the speech. It was what happened after the gala, on a quiet block jeweled with streetlights, in a little shop where spools of thread shone like candy. Sienna Vale stood behind a counter in her emerald dress with a fresh, invisible seam. She folded cotton shirts in neat squares under Imani's gentle supervision. Her nails weren't built for it. Her pride wasn't either. But her hands learned the motion, small, repetitive, sacred in its way. When a teenage boy came in sheepish, clutching the cuff of a jacket that had frayed, she looked up and said, we can fix that, and surprised herself by meaning we. The next morning at brunch, Magnus listened to a girl named Tasha talk about studying architecture and sleeping 2 hours between shifts. Sienna listened to a mother talk about choosing between bus fare and dinner. When they left, their lives were the same size on paper. But paper lies. Weeks later, the foundation published the supplier list Magnus had promised, and the comments were the usual internet stew. Some called it performative, some called it overdue, some called it inspiring. Only time keeps score properly. What mattered was purchase orders that moved like weather into neighborhoods with roofs that needed it. As for Anika, she took a day off. She visited her mother's grave with peonies so pink they looked defiant. She told her about the dress. It tore, Mama, she said, arranging petals. You would have laughed. Then you would have sewed it while telling me a story about how everything good in our lives has a stitch in it. When she stood, the wind moved through the trees like applause no one was embarrassed to give. Months passed. At a later gala, with fewer chandeliers and more community tables, Sienna arrived in a simple nail dress. She asked the server his name and remembered it. At the mic, Anika introduced the first class of Alderich Service Fellows, and the crowd stood in the easy way of people who stand because they feel lighter when they do. After, Magnus found Anika near the side door and handed her a small box. Before you say you don't accept gifts, he said, it's not a gift. It's a return. Inside lay a tiny silver thimble, old, smooth with use. It was my mother's, he said. She mended sails in a coastal town before all this. She taught me that you guide the needle by protecting what's tender. Anika's throat tightened. Thank you, she said. We'll put it in the Alderidge case. The story will do more work than the medal. He nodded. Across the room, Sienna was speaking with Kay, the intern, with no cameras in sight. They laughed about something small, the way trust starts. There was never a press release about what Sienna did or didn't become. That's what made it real. She still loved beautiful things. She still made mistakes. But when she did, she apologized without embroidery. Sometimes, late at night, she would open her closet and run a thumb over that emerald seam, the one you couldn't see unless you knew. It reminded her that luxury, without kindness, is just cost. And if you stayed late at an Alderidge event, after the music softened and chairs scraped, you would see Anika in flats, carrying plates with the servers, laughing with them, asking about classes, telling them to text if a bus didn't come. Once, a woman at a table tried to flag her down with a snap. The woman's friend reached to stop her, whispering, "That's the founder." The snapper blushed and lowered her hand. The apology she gave the server was clumsy, but it was a beginning. The story became a quiet legend in a city full of loud ones. A torn dress, a public choosing, an unexpected seam. Not because of the money or the scandal, but because humility, like a good stitch, disappears into the fabric and holds. By the way, if you felt something shift reading this, if a part of you wants to stand taller for someone else, don't let that feeling die in your scroll. That's where change begins, in small, unphotographed choices. What would you do the next time a room tempts you to measure people by costumes instead of character? If this spoke to you, subscribe for more true, dramatic stories that challenge and heal. Share it with a friend who believes character still matters.